our main speaker tonight. We're delighted to have Christina Zdenek. Christina is a wildlife biologist who specialises in conservation biology fieldwork in remote tropical regions. She has a love of reptiles, which developed from childhood when she bred veiled chameleons at the age of 11 and helped care for a 2-metre red-tailed boa, which was the family pet from the age of 5. Okay, so armed with a desire to dedicate her life to conservation biology, she sought to obtain a clear scientific understanding of ecosystem dynamics and the complex factors that impact nature's resilience and productivity. She studied ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of California, Irvine, where she also had a Division I college basketball career. So, Christine, can you slam dunk? I wish. I ask that because I'm just sick of people asking me if I can slam dunk. The answer is no, so it's a particularly sensitive question for me. But anyway, back. So, Christina won a Fulbright Fellowship, which enabled her to start her new life and dream as a conservation biologist by working in Cape York Peninsula, where she became an expert on the endangered rainforest parrot, the great palm cockatoo. She then pursued her Masters of Philosophy at the University of Queensland. The time between these programs, she was employed as a conservation officer with ANU, where she discovered individual drumbeats performed by the cockatoos. For her PhD and grant award with Nat Geo, she will investigate an endangered species of highly venomous snake, the death adder, on an urban-bush interface. We're delighted to have Christina speak to us tonight on the great palm cockatoo. I will hand over to her. I will warn you, you should all sit up in your seats and pay attention because you might be asked some questions. So, thank you, Christina.
Thank you. All right, well, thanks so much for coming. It's very exciting to be here in person with a full room. And as you've just heard, I'm Christina Zdenek. And for a long time, I've been researching palm cockatoos since 2009. So today I'll be focusing specifically on conservation of palm cockatoos. So I'll start by acknowledging first the traditional owners which we meet today. So it's Turrbal and Jagera people, and also the people of where I worked on Cape York, so Yutangalu, Kantanapanu and Kukuya'u language group. Also, I'd like to mention and acknowledge my mentors and the researchers before me, learn a lot from them. And of course, I acknowledge that I'm privileged, and that's why I've been able to do all of these things. So that's important to mention. Okay, let's start at the end, in case I lose some people along the way. So the take-home message that I would like you all to go home with, palm cockatoos, they are endangered, and they will effectively go extinct within 50 years if we don't do something drastic. And experts, myself included, believe that the best ways to help are to protect every single last remaining of these ancient nest hollows, and I'll go into how old they are and what requirement is there. In the longer term, ensure the success of ranger programs to do cool burns in a mosaic fashion to prevent those really intense fires. And important part is leaving 5 to 10% long time since fire up in the tropical savanna areas, so across Cape York, and this also goes to Northern Territory as well, research has shown. Emergency measures spend money to create fire breaks around known nesting hollows, and we do need to continue research to really better understand why they are in such severe decline. So that's the take home. So why am I here to talk to you about palm cockatoos? So these are papers that I've published. So we looked at drumming and found some really cool, interesting aspects about palm cockatoos there. That was a popular paper. We did population viability analyses looking at the rate of decline and with different parameters of the population, and also looked at their vocal repertoire and how it was very complex, geographical variation of those vocal repertoires, and individuality. So that's the sort of range that I've worked on palm cockies officially. And what that looks like, if you were to put it in photo form, that's me sort of wandering in the bush. Yeah, so I use this 10-meter extension pole in order to peer into their nest hollows, because for palmies, it's all about the hollows. And I desperately wanted to climb up there, but a lot of the hollows, they're in piped trees that are dead and are half about to fall over. And even trying to put ladders up against these, and you start climbing up and the tree starts moving, you know, ooh, let's go back down. So it's very tricky to climb palm cockatoo nests, I can tell you. But this was a handy way that I could just put a camera at the top and see what state. So I would do this in the middle of the day when the birds weren't there, of course, to minimize impact. And I was able to climb some. That is not a palmy hollow, by the way. The big, massive hollow's on the other side, but the photographer didn't have that foresight. And also living in situations where I had to build my own toilet like that. So that was good fun. So there's a personal side to this as well, so that you can relate. Yeah, ash is helpful to keep the smell down. Okay, but you came here to look at palm cockatoos, so let's dive into palmies and why they're such wonderful, sexy birds. So here is a photo, one of my most proud photos I think that I've taken, and that's of a pair of palm cockatoos. Who can tell me which one's the female? Left or right? Left? Well done. Okay, you passed the first test. That is the female. She's got a smaller bill and an overall smaller head. But if you go up there and you're trying to identify or work out which sex it is, you got to be careful because these lower feathers here can obscure that cheek patch and make it seem like it's a smaller patch. And so you might be confused that it's a female with a smaller head, but it's a male who's covered his cheeks. Anyway, this is a male and he's drumming. So this is that behavior where they go and make their own sticks. And so there's no tasty treats involved. It is sheerly to make a noise, and it's in a social context that they do this. And so here it's in a social context in a pre-breeding mode and with the female, and it helps with pair bonding and I think getting the hormones right in order to time breeding. Now we can't actually test that because you'd have to be able to catch palm cockatoos, and no one has ever caught a palm cockatoo successfully. And I didn't bother trying. They're too smart. So that paper that we published about drumming, it went very popular all around the world. So New Scientist, Washington Post, Cosmos, Irish News, Sydney Morning Herald, and New York Times. So people went nuts for it, that the males have their own individualistic drum beats, and we managed, so it took me 4 years to acquire 60 drumming events. Now prior to that, so that's on footage, and that we could analyze and put as part of this paper. It would take me sometimes 100 hours just to get one data point. So that's pretty crazy. I mean, I work in the lab with snake venoms, and I get like 100 data points in one day now. So and then they make you work hard, I tell you. So let's have a look at, I'm just going to play you some calls, get you in the mood. This is all palmies. All right, and here is some awesome drumming. This is a Grevillea glauca seed pod. So instead of a stick, he's gone and collected that hard seed pod, and he's banging it against a dead hardwood tree, making a really loud noise. That was in a territorial context. This individual, he was completely quiet, didn't call the whole entire time, and he just keeps having a listen, perhaps assessing the quality of the hollow as a potential nest. Could also be a younger male that's practicing, and there was no audience, and he went for 20 minutes. It was 148 drum beats, I believe, from memory. So that was good fun. And here is how they break off the stick. So it takes a really strong beak to do that. And now here's another one drumming. And as you can see, it's just a branch, not necessarily on a tree hollow. They're characters, aren't they? Super sexy birds. So that was very cool to be able to witness and collect all of those drumming events. So where do palm cockatoos live? So in red shows across New Guinea and Cape York where they occur. So there's different subspecies up in New Guinea compared with our species up on Cape York. But within Australia, as you all would know, only you can find them on Cape York. And so looking at this in a little bit more detail with some rivers, here's Iron Range and Lockhart River. Most of the work that I did occurred there. And that's a very special part of the world. It's got the largest lowland rainforest left in Australia. And a very cool community there in Lockhart River. So whilst this might look boring, I hope you can find some interest in it because it was 2 years of my life to create this. Now, I will play you. I found out that palm cockatoos are unique across parrots in the world and that they have this really varied repertoire, that they mix and match a bunch of syllables. So rather than between 5 and 10 or 12, maybe 15 different syllables that most parrots around the world vocalize, palm cockatoos I found to have 27, and they will mix them more like songbirds. So let's see if this will play. So did you follow along with my little, yeah? So they're doing all sorts of crazy things. Let's see if this one plays. Did you hear that little donkey call? Oh. So they do. I also worked out in what context they do this, and sometimes it's quite handy because, you know, you could be blind in the forest or not see the birds, which oftentimes you go out there and I'm just waiting to see where the birds are going to display that day, because males can display and basically have ownership of upwards of 7 different hollows, so you're not sure where they're going to show up on any given day. And based on what calls I would hear where, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going there. That's where it's happening. So good displays, and that's what I was going for, the drumming sort of thing. And a certain call that they give only when they land, that's quite helpful, or when they're trying to defend their territory against an intruder pair sort of thing. So that was quite handy to understand. So that one there, this is, as you can see, a hello duet. And so I discovered that they are doing this simultaneous duet, which is incredible because 2 pairs, and I reckon it's a pair that's been together for a long time, really experienced, and it helps them to defend their territory. They defend it vigorously against intruder pairs. And they somehow visually coordinate, you know, out of the 27 different syllables that they can give, both of the pairs will give the exact same syllable at the same time. How do you work that one out? It's incredible, and they just key in to each other, and they're so in tune with each other, these pairs. And it's almost like, I don't know, a comparison might be an army that's standing forward, and it's very intimidating that they're all in unison, you know, sort of thing. And I think with palmies, the better that they can do this vocal duet, it's like, oh, they're a very experienced pair. We can't prove that, but that's what I reckon. They give this during a territorial dispute. All right, so that's a bit about their vocalizations. So they only lay 1 egg, invariably. So other parrots and cockatoos will lay like 4 to 6 eggs, and that's every year. Palmies, it's 1 every other year. And because of such a low success rate, of a chance of that egg first hatching and then making it to the fledgling stage, It works out that one pair can, well, only successfully fledge a chick once every 10 years. So it's a very slow life breeding, life history sort of bird. So therefore, if any problems happen in the population, and you have this aging population that isn't able to breed, then you can have a problem that goes masked for 20, 30, 40 years. And it's just aging birds that aren't replacing themselves. So it's important to know how are they breeding and whether things are going wrong. So that was a very special scene, and it's very fine sticks. That's another thing about these nests, is that they're the only parrot in the world to bring sticks into a hollow to make a nest. And in fact, this can be 1 meter deep. And so imagine the length of time. It would be months that a bird, well, both pairs, it's mainly the male that brings with his bigger bill, that he will actually invest and bring all these sticks into this one nest hollow. So they're super choosy and they need to defend it vigorously. Here's another egg in the hollow. This egg is actually in my hand there, and it's because I knew exactly when it was supposed to hatch and gave it a 5-day window, and the birds stopped incubating it, and it was an infertile egg. So it's another problem in the population. We're not sure why this is, possibly inbreeding due to small population size. But yeah, quite a small egg, precious thing. As you can see, again, there's fine sticks that takes a while, and that's on top of a bunch of other sticks that have just been lodged that they need to drop them in. So between making nests with sticks and palm cockatoos drumming with sticks, they're absolutely obsessed with them. And they just always love to grab them, strip them, do all sorts of things with sticks. It gets them very excited. And as a researcher, going and collecting the sticks after they've dropped it and spending like 2 hours to find where it is and grass this high, I also became obsessed with sticks. It's like people and their dogs. You end up looking like them over time. I don't know. Became like palmies. Okay, so here's one of palmy dropping sticks down a hollow. So it's all this massive energy into this tree that they need to spend. So just really illustrating that point. Now, one problem that palmies endure is, here's Tropical Cyclone Monica, 2006. And Lockhart River is literally right here. So it was in the eye of the storm. And they've had several cyclones. It is a natural process. However, with climate change, it's making storms more intense and more frequent. So whilst Steve Murphy, my predecessor, did his PhD on palmies, did show that there was a roughly equal amount of hollows that were dropped from the wind and others that were created by twisting off in the top half of the tree, creating a structure that can then be hollowed out by termites. If that happens a lot more frequently, then the length of time it takes for that whole process to happen doesn't happen quick enough before it gets knocked over. So that is a problem. So like most other species, climate change isn't going to help palm cockatoos. The second problem they have with their hollows is that they're vulnerable to becoming chimneys, like I witnessed here very sadly one day of a palm cocky hollow, burning in a fire that came through that was lit by people in the region. Now, I haven't published this, but 17.4%, 8 out of 46 of the palm cockatoo hollows, when I went back there for a filming gig from 2017, they had burned down. And that was just in 1 year having a look. And I've got like 200 hollows. I was only able to make it to that many. But that's a huge rate, and that's a really big problem. And when you see all the trees that you see that the palm cockatoos invest so much time in just burning down, really, it makes you quite upset, and you start crying like this emoji. So a long-term solution, we need to majorly alter fire regimes. And also great paper here, John Winowski and Westerway, showing that the age of these hollows, so the exact species that palm cockatoos need to breed, Eucalyptus tetradonta, that's the majority of the species that they breed in. Here it's 120 to 250 years old before they form a hollow that is 10 centimeters, bigger than 10 centimeters. So, you know, we're talking that big. Palmy can't fit in that, right? So that's, if it takes that long for this very specific tree species to create a hollow that's at least 10 centimeters large. And then unpublished data that I'm revealing to you right now for the first time is I climbed 20 palm cockatoo nest hollows, and I got their average diameter at the entrance was 26.2 centimeters. And here's a standard deviation of 7.3. So much bigger, thank you, than that 10 centimeters. So they are ancient trees, ancient. And that's why I claim that palm cocky trees that they're nesting in must be at least 300 years old. Every one of them needs super protection. If something happens to a hollow, like say these really intense fires that come through, like the end of the dry season, come November and December, well, it's like a double hit punch for these birds, because it's not only destroying that tree that effectively can't be replaced and all the time and energy they spend to make that nesting platform, but with more intense fires, and the hotter they are, the worse off that termites are in their area. So making the ability of the forest to recreate the next hollows even more difficult. So because termite populations from these papers have shown that they drop severely after intense fires. So that is a problem. So palmies need termites. And also I just wanted to show you some cool photos of palmies. So here are some of the hollows, just huge. I mean, that one would be about this big, you know, around. This one, unfortunately, these two burned down in a fire. This one had been a chimney, but fortunately, because the tree was alive, happened to still survive and have the structural integrity to remain vertical. This one was a nest twice, which was pretty cool. But I know we're here and talking about birds and, you know, bird life Queensland here, but, you know, it's not just palmies that will benefit from better fire regimes. So 9 mammal species that have declined markedly in Northern Australia, 6 are arboreal that need hollows. So hollows are becoming more rare and a difficult thing to maintain in the landscape. And other bird species too benefit from these better fire regimes. I'm just really honing that point. If you haven't noticed, it's really about fire regimes. And an important thing too is that at least 5% of the landscape up there, the tropical savannas, has been recommended by John Winarski and Sarah Legge to be 10 years unburnt. So that's an important point. Short-term solution is to protect every nest hollow we possibly can. And so I was, you know, just totally sick of seeing these hollows burn down. I thought I have to do something about it. So I grabbed a rake and a trusty whippersnipper and got heat exhaustion on many days in the middle of the day up in the tropics. Very different from the Russia talk before. And grabbed some locals who are really keen on helping their local birds as well. So that was fantastic to be able to save these trees. And here's just some examples. If you can see, some on the left would be before and after. Before and after. So at the right time of year, right before the fire season comes, clearing a fire break around these hollows and any sort of debris. Because it's not just whether it'll burn it down that time, but it'll weaken it so that next fire, it'll then burn down. So they can only withstand so many fires, copying it at the bottom of the hollow, if not a big fire, totally burning it down completely, as you saw in that photo I showed before. So this is a really cool example. So that's before I cleared around it, and that's clearing around it. And here is after the fire came through. Is that not proof in the pudding or what? So that was fantastic outcome for this palm cockatoo hollow. It was saved from the fires that year. So that won't, you know, fire can't come through there, or unless it's a really huge one, it's unlikely to go through there again. that could be a really cool conservation measure if there's enough funding to put for this. Of course, that's not the only enemy, fires. There's also bulldozers. So that's why my colleagues and I got together, and I didn't do this population viability analysis, but I did write a letter and worked with my colleagues, and we successfully, when was this, 2015 I think it was, we successfully got palm cockatoos listed from near threatened to vulnerable so that they could be better protected up against any developments like mines or along roadsides or quarries and that sort of thing. So that was through collaboration. It was Dr. Miles Keeley and Professor Rob Heinsohn up on the Cape doing this. And it's led to, in some parts, some mines using a really big 1.5 kilometre barrier from known nesting hollows of palmies, so that they can't clear in that area. So that's a fantastic outcome, and only happened because we were able to increase their conservation status. And here is a baby palm cockatoo. If you haven't seen one, that's it sitting on the nest. So they'll only sit there for a few days and then fledge to the gallery for us. But yeah, that was a hollow that was saved. So I worked with some mining companies and helped them to develop ways to better survey for palm cockatoos. And we've got a paper that's currently in review so that we can help all the other mines and development applications to better survey for these difficult birds. They are very difficult, I must admit. And then recently, so just last November, we succeeded again, and through some more data that we were able to publish in this paper, Miles Keeley, and here's me and Rob and a statistician, that we got them listed to endangered. So it was only recent, yeah. So I've talked about improving fire regimes, protecting individual nesting hollows, and then the legal protection side of things. And then, of course, public support for funding needs to come in to play. And along those lines, that's why I promoted these birds when we did get them to uplisted to endangered. I wrote a conversation article, which had some good viewing around the world. So that was Rob and I. That was recent. Just some various things along the way. I wrote this kids book, Citizen magazine, wrote an article about palmies. So I'm big into the science communication, because if humans are the problem, then we can be the solution, can't we? But people need to know about it, and you know how we can save it. And yeah, you won't want to save what you don't know or don't love, right? So yeah, if you hadn't seen, there's an Australian Geographic article I wrote, a few years back anyway. Here are some photos inside a story that I wrote, along with the photos that I included. Here's that hollow that turned into a chimney. You can see the charcoal on the inside. So only because it was alive did it manage to survive that fire. And then, yeah, I worked with Cynthia Garai. She's a Hungarian, flew in from Hungary to help me make a palm cockatoo documentary. And that's on YouTube. It's 10 minutes long. So you're welcome to check that out if you'd like. And that's what it looks like. That's the icon. And you can just Google it if you like. It's funny to look at the comments. Anyway, I'll leave that there for you to have a look at. And I'm really a big fan of integrating, and this communities are really sick of people just fly in, fly out, and they want somebody who cares and stays, and they don't want to have to teach new people all the time their culture and everything like that. So I always make a really big effort to just integrate. The Lockhart River community is a fantastic dance group, and one year I helped them and was like, I don't know what they called me, but I was like an organizer or manager or something of the team to help them go down and compete with all the other communities on Cape York for the dance, and they won. So fantastic community up there. So the future for palmies, hopefully we can get more government funding for the rangers, make more better fire regimes every year. Government and non-profit funding to clear fire breaks around hollows. That would be fantastic. I'd go up there every year if I could. I've been able to get up there through filming gigs, which has been helpful, and I can collect a little bit of data here and there. but something that's really targeted is what palm cockatoos need, I tell you. And maybe Professor Heinsohn or I will win a grant to research them more, to better understand these impacts, and to catch something when it's going wrong effectively. And more documentaries. I will be up there in 2 weeks to see these lovely birds and to go visit them again. So I've worked with all these groups. They sometimes put me as a cameraman, other times on screen, most of the time behind screen. But I am fortunate enough to go up there twice this year to film palmies and put them on the big screen. So not just Australia can get on board, but the whole world. That's the goal. That's what I want to do anyway. And prize time. All right, so your quiz. Well, I don't know if it's a quiz because I haven't told you, but there is a prize here. And the question is, does anybody know the local Indigenous name for the palm cockatoo? I haven't told you this, but no? Right. Okay, well, it's Kila, K-I-L-A. Now you know. And it only occurs up there, so it's just the one name, unlike other parts in Australia where things are called multiple different names. So I have to come up with a backup. Oh, shoot. Somebody was supposed to get that. Oh, okay, I've got a good backup. Where are the only palm cockatoos? What zoo is the only palm cockatoos in Australia? Oh, it's too hard? Huh? Oh my gosh. Who said something? And what did you guess? You guessed Taronga. Oh my gosh. So it used to be just Adelaide Zoo, but I slightly misspoke because they have recently given one of their birds to Taronga. So I will give you the prize. Come on up. And you get to choose. So the reason why I say Redbubble is because you can go and get all sorts of palm cockatoo apparel. Here I've printed out a book. Or if you have an iPhone 10, you can have you want the book. Okay.
Apple are rotten to the core. So.
Oh, right. Well, I like Rappo. All right. Enjoy the book. I believe that is it. Yeah, so here's just some contact details. There's business cards around the place if anybody wants to get in touch. Always love talking palm cockatoos or snakes. I'm a local snake catcher, so grab my card for that if you want. And other than that, I think I've gotten acknowledgements, yeah. So affiliations, grants, and people. And you for coming and being here in person and listening. I hope you enjoy the talk about palm cockatoos. Thank you so much.
Are there any questions?
Did you want to call him?
Oh, well,
That was my time.
Oh, yeah, you're fine.
Okay. All right, I'll let him do it.
Fantastic talk. I really enjoyed it a lot.
Thanks.
I was just wondering, with your little fire breaks, that seem to be extremely successful, which is great.
Yep.
Did you study the effect of the fire breaks on the termites?
Unfortunately, no. So I was up there studying palm cockatoos and trying desperately to get their drumming behavior, and that took 100% of my time. It would be a whole nother PhD, really. But there are often termites right at the base of palm cockatoo hollows, which is probably what you're getting at. And so I imagine it would help them and prevent them from dying. But where they're at with palm cockatoo hollows, if they're directly at the base, they've already done the work. And it's often, I'd say most of the time, and I haven't hacked into them to see if they're a living termite active mound. But I'd say that they would have already done their job. They could possibly widen it inside. I don't know too much about termites. I just know they're very helpful and we need them. Thanks for that question. I think we've got the mic there.
You answered one of my questions in your talk because I was wondering if one of the dangers was stealing cockatoos, exporting them, but then you said nobody's caught one, so I presume that applies to people who come along and poach them as well. So
No, I can comment on that.
Yeah.
So that if they can reach the hollow either through climbing or with a ladder, if they get it at the right time, they can either grab the egg or a chick, and that has a higher success rate for poachers than trying to catch an adult bird in the nest. Is probably the only place they'd be able to get it. So that when they were doing it, I'm not sure if it is happening from Australia. It's probably a lot easier to do from New Guinea. And I've talked with people at different parrot conferences, and they've told me firsthand they've seen whole operations where palm cockatoo nests are being poached in New Guinea. And so it would be a lot harder to do in Australia. I wouldn't imagine that that's an issue here. In the past, it certainly was, probably 60s and 70s. I did find a ladder, an ancient, rusted old heavy ladder in the bush one day, like a kilometre out there. I was like, oh, they just left that there, and that was from the old poaching days.
Mm-hmm. And the second question relates to you mentioned one of the birds was defending 7 hollows. Can you just throw some more light on that, please?
Yeah, sure. Palm cockatoos, when they're leading up to breeding, so probably around June, July, they will go and visit on a morning. I've seen a male that I was able to track through photo identification. That same male went to 7 different hollows. And that was like his morning run, like a male run or something, but effectively just going and spending a few minutes on each of the hollows. So that was within about 700 square meters, that was. And all the hollows of interest to him, he would stop at, and he did this on a number of occasions. And I speak about him because I could identify him really well. And the idea is, I think, that they're trying to work out, okay, which hollow can I successfully secure as mine against the other intruder pairs that might be at the edge of the territory, but also as a plan B for if any of the hollows will collapse in a strong wind from a cyclone or burn in the next fire, which happens every year. So it's good if they can have a plan B so that they don't need to wait 2 years to try again. And it depends on if they had a lot of energy investment into a nest and then lose it, they probably won't go again. But if it was really early on and they haven't, for instance, laid an egg, that hollow burns or falls down, they can then use one of the alternatives. So it's a very competitive world for palm cockatoos when it comes to hollows. Yep.
I was up in Iron Range in December, and we came across a number of large flocks of sulphur-crested cockatoos.
Yeah.
Are they a problem? Do they compete for...
100%. They do absolutely compete. So there's an overlap of nesting requirements of those two birds. And Rob Heinsohn published a paper that sulphur-crested cockatoos, they compete with both palm cockatoos and eclectus parrots there, but eclectus don't compete with palm cockatoos. So it's really the sulphurs that the palmies need to compete with, along with other palm cockatoos. It would be interesting if somebody did a population count and compared it to some sort of baseline to know whether those populations are going up or down. Because if they do increase for whatever reason, then that would be bad for palm cockatoos for sure. It just makes life that much harder for them. I've got some cool footage in a documentary run by NHK that's a Japanese version of the ABC. And that's where I was on screen. It's funny, the documentary has me dubbed in Japanese, but in very exciting Japanese, something like that. I'm like always very excited. And they put all these cartoon characters in the documentary that pop up and emojis. Anyway, in that doco, we were able to record this competition of palm cockatoos with sulphurs. And there was a palmy down the nest, another one nearby, and the sulphur had come down to the hollow, and it flicks its crest and opens its wings to say like, hey, is anybody in there? Because looking up, you would just see that silhouette, right? And sure enough, a palmy emerged because they did have an egg at that stage. emerged and sulfur flew away, and that male palmy flew after the sulfur, and then the female came and joined him. They do this joint territorial defense. Everything with palmies and breeding takes so much effort for them. It's all joint, from making the nest to defending the nest to incubating the egg and feeding the chick.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just wondering, have anyone tried to estimate the populations in New Guinea? I mean, they're certainly fairly common in some areas that I visited in West Papua. I was just wondering whether anyone's had a stab at that and how that might affect its designation, threat status.
Yep.
The second question, sorry, is has anyone ever seen them or heard them drumming in New Guinea? I'm just curious because given that it's possibly an adaptation to eucalypts drumming on hardwoods, in the rainforest they may not be able to so easily drum.
Yeah, absolutely. To your first point, Paul Egag did his master's in New Guinea on palm cockatoos back in 2000s, I think it was, early 2000s. And he was looking at the harvesting rate of palm cockatoos, and the locals do eat them there. In Australia, the locals don't eat them. They see it as a spirit bird, don't touch it, don't do anything, otherwise it gives you bad luck. So that's fortunate for us here, for palmies. But in New Guinea, they harvest the birds and eat them, along with the various other wildlife there. And through his research, what he focused on, he didn't have population numbers, but he found that the harvest rate was absolutely unsustainable because of that slow life history of it taking them so long to get just one chick out. They can't really take that hit and recover. So that's what's known from there. Don't believe anything else has been done. But in all of his time, he didn't see palm cockatoos drumming there. So I haven't gone there and checked out myself, but I don't believe that they do drum there. And Dr. Miles Keeley and I worked on a paper together. It was the vocalization differences across Cape York. Found that they're immensely different depending on what populations. And if I hear a palmy call, I'll know exactly, oh yeah, that's not Iron Range, that's Morton Telegraph Station. It's very distinctive depending on where you go. So if you go up there, have a listen, and through that, so that's a cultural thing, so these birds are vocal learners, but we found that drumming is exceedingly rare anywhere else except Lockhart River. So it's a behavior that has evolved and been passed on culturally in Lockhart River, and it's done quite extensively, although it's still difficult to encounter, but not so much the rest of the Cape. Like Miles spent months and months in all these different sites and got 2 drumming events the whole time. And for instance, in 3 months, I got 13 drumming events. Yeah, so as a comparison. In 1 year, I got 30, but I kept getting better and better as the years went on.
Yeah, Christina,
Yep, Phil.
you were saying about their competition and strong pair bonds. In Arakoon, where I worked for a few years, outside my office, every time the terminalias fruited,
Yeah.
There'd be flocks of 5, 6 or 7 sometimes. So is that kind of an Arakoon thing, or is it? Do they ever flock? And I know at Quintal Beach too. When the beach almond, that's it. The beach almonds, you can always find them there when the beach almonds.
Yeah, it's always the way. Locals are like, oh yeah, I see 6 regularly. I don't know why you struggle so much. Like, you buggers. That's a bit of a rare situation that there's a food source that is so good, it's so perfect. It's kind of like almonds inside. It's this thin white sliver. And it's got a lot of protein, so the breeders of parrots tell me. And because of that resource, I think they've come from a fair way away and congregated. and they sort of tolerate each other in that scenario. They're not competing for hollows. So in my 28 months of living and working with palm cockatoos over the 7-8 years, I would have seen 6 birds only on about 3 occasions. So I think it's quite special. I don't know if it's particularly an Arakoon thing versus a Lockhart thing, or like if you happen to have a lot more beach almonds at Quintel Beach at Lockhart River, there's just a few. And where I saw mine was in a tree, and it was like this congregation. I think that also the juvenile males, or sorry, just the juvenile birds hang out together. I think they call them floater flocks or something like that. I saw 4 juveniles hanging out together. So that's a different sort of scenario where they hang out. But generally, absolutely not a flocking bird. So that's another sort of rare, unusual thing about palmies compared with other cockatoos. Yeah.
And they carry on like galahs sometimes, you know, hang upside down and that kind of stuff.
Oh, they do wonderful displays. I'll leave that those videos. I was purposely leaving them out for my talk in August to, where is it, Sheena?
It's an ornithology conference that was announced tonight, which is going live on the website
There we go.
this evening. And Christina is going to be one of our keynote speakers August the 6th. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no
Look
worries.
forward to hearing more.
I couldn't give it all away tonight, so come to that talk and I'll give you more good.
I thought that too. Hope you're holding on to a few lovely things. Could I just ask you about fire management? I've heard Steve Murphy speak about fire management in the context of
Right.
PAMIs and the work you've done together. Given the birds up listed now, will there be any greater investment by Queensland Government on fire management? And how are you coping with indiscriminate burning during climate change when fires at the wrong time of the year are becoming much more intense?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing, and unfortunately it requires a lot of boots on the ground, and that's expensive, you know. So thousands of years ago, you know, Indigenous communities and language groups were living on the land, and they just did it naturally, and that's just what they needed to do in order to survive. And we see from satellite photos in different parts of Australia. There's one I'm thinking of in Western Australia from early, I don't know, mid-1900s or something like that, maybe it was during World War II, so like 1945 or something. They have this satellite photo and it shows the fire scars in a mosaic pattern, and that was before you know, Europeans started managing the land. So we've got good evidence that that's how it was, and all of these negative aspects that we know about intense fires. How we stop that at this stage, I always try to talk to the community up there, the rangers. There's a national parks there, so I've got them knowing, okay, really focus on early burns. You know, we're talking June, July. Don't let it go to September, October, November, because that's when it's going to destroy these hollows that are 300 years old. So at this stage, it's mainly through trying to get the locals on board with it, and you know, doing that program that I did with them and clearing around it. That's a real sort of hands-on. Oh, we're trying to protect it from fire. Well, let's maybe not have such intense fires, and then the word gets around, because it is people going out there. And I've had a chat with one of them once when I saw them. They were, you know, going to light it. It's the wrong time of year. It was one of the local First Nations people, and I asked why you're lighting at this time of year, and he said, "Oh, good to run the pig and the dogs." So he liked to have his dogs go chase after the pig in an open area so that they can catch the pig and then eat it. And so that was an unfortunate thing, that it's less work for someone whose goal is to chase pigs with their dogs. It's less work for them to light a fire at the end of the fire, you know, when it goes really, at the end of the dry season, when it goes really hot. So they need to be told by the elders to, hey, pull that behaviour, pull that up.
Perhaps we need to donate some pigs to them.
Some what?
Donate some domestic pigs.
Oh, yeah. But I hope government funding is coming. I suppose a lot of it's up to researchers to try to go win the general funds that are out there through Australian Research Council and that sort of thing. So I might supervise a student with Rob at some stage, if we can win some grants. It's a very long process to try to do that. It would be nice if the government just said, okay, for all these endangered species, you each get this amount of dollars. Who are the experts? Let's just give them the money. That makes sense. And then we save months and months. And sometimes we work on an application over the course of like 6 to 8 months, developing it and working with different groups. So instead of like trying to apply to win the money, we could just start using it and doing the work on the ground that needs to be done. That would be ideal. Yeah. Conscious of time, do we need to end or? One last question.
Can I ask a light question to end on?
All
Are
right.
they left-handed, right-handed, or do they beat the drums with both hands?
Good question. Yeah, they're mostly left-handed. It's the odd one that does it with his right foot. Thank you.
Call on Stephen Prowse to thank Christina on behalf of Birds Queensland.
Christina, thank you very much for talking to us about these amazing, culturally sophisticated Australian drummers. You wasn't aware that it was so restricted. And I'm so impressed with the scope of your work. I have one of Christina's business cards here, so I urge you to pick one up, because on the back it has an amazing photograph of, I presume it's the boa.
Oh, that is a white-lipped pit viper from.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's from Komodo Island, and it's the only place in the world where that blue morph occurs.
So check it out.
It's gorgeous.
The drumming is quite. I've never seen these birds, so to see and hear the drumming and the tool making, and I had the same question about whether they're left or right clawed as well, but now I know the answer. Yep. And I particularly also enjoyed the way you took us through the calls. I think it's a wonderful way of presenting those calls, and it's so sophisticated. It's very sad that they are in decline and they are so threatened, and so I sincerely hope that people are listening to you and you get funding to continue the extraordinary work that you've done. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.